According to General Hospital spoilers, Kai Taylor could be arrested and give a false confession as the Drew Cain shooter. Will Kai carry out a daring plot to save Trina and Portia Robinson? GH fans know Kai made a huge mistake when he went against Trina and her family. Kai praised Drew and believed he was doing the right thing by telling him about Curtis Ashford's dirty agenda. However, Kai eventually developed a new perspective after listening in on Drew's recent talk with Curtis. It made Kai realize Drew is a monster, thus his loyalty has returned to Trina and the people she cares about the most. That was clear when Kai chose to leave Drew bleeding on the floor rather than calling for help after the gunshot. Kai's top concern was to get Trina out of there and avoid any charges. Keeping Trina out of legal trouble may be a major concern for Kai as the plot progresses. Kai and Trina's fingerprints are found in several locations at Drew's house, so their covert visit may come back to bother them in the future. If it appears like Trina may face charges of any kind, Kai may fake a false confession and arrange a bargain to ensure her freedom. Kai may undertake a daring move like that for Portia's sake if the cops start looking too closely at her as a suspect. Kai wouldn't want Trina to lose her mother to prison, especially after thwarting Curtis' attempt to gain an advantage against Drew. If Kai falsely admits, he may lie about the true cause for his visit to Drew's residence, so avoiding the Portia blackmail scenario. Many followers turned against Kai after he betrayed Trina and her family, thus this predicament provides an opportunity to earn those fans back. Kai may continue to demonstrate that Trina and her family are more important to him than anything else. Perhaps Kai will even be willing to do jail time at least until the truth about the shooter is revealed. At the Five Poppies Resort, Jocelyn and Vaughn were still imprisoned in an empty room. Joss was surprised that Britt didn't assist them. Pascal and one of his henchmen brought them water, but only in return for information. Joss and Vaughn try to portray themselves as inexperienced agents. Britt was creeping up the corridor into the room while the henchman held a knife to Joss' throat. After pushing Joss on the ground, Pascal stated that if the code to the WSB box Joss provided him was incorrect, he would consider her useless and dispose of her. After he left, Joss and Vaughn argued in despair, and Vaughn thought there must be a mole in the agency. Britt eventually answered the door. Joss begged her to help them get out, and she had to admit that they were WSB. Britt refused to explain how she was alive or why she was there, telling Jocelyn that she could only do so much. She placed a pair of manicure scissors in Joss' hand, told them they would have to help themselves, and then went. Pascal intercepted Britt as she was walking out the door. She asked him what the heck was going on and why he was kidnapping honeymooners. When Pascal responded he was managing things, she told him he was lousy at taking initiative and that he should not do anything else until he returned. In the room, Joss showed Vaughn the scissors. Later, when one of the henchmen returned to the confinement chamber, Joss and Vaughn startled him by not being tied up, and Vaughn attacked him. Britt returned to her room and attempted to call Jason using the burner phone, but it did not go through. When the call was finally connected, the reception was awful. As Britt cried into the phone, "Jason, you have to come back," Pascal walked in, grabbed her arm, and informed her that this time she had gone too far. Jason called Danny from the Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. His flight was delayed. As he waited, he recalled his recent chats with Britt. When Britt's call came through, he was already in line to board. Because of the poor reception, it is unclear what he heard. Drew retrieved Willow's engagement ring from the safe at his house. While Trina and Kai were hiding in the bedroom, Drew placed the ring in front of a picture of him and Willow on the mantel, noting that Willow would see that everything was going to be fine. As he finished his drink, a shot was fired, striking him in the back. He collapsed to the floor as a shadowy person approached and shot him in the back once more. After Trina and Kai believed they had heard the gunman leave, Kai walked outside with a softball bat to investigate. Trina followed soon after. She checked Drew and discovered a pulse. As she went to stop the bleeding, she wanted to call 911, but Kai told her to leave because they couldn't be there. They noticed a car approach and went to the back door. Kai paused to leave the front door slightly open. Tracy stepped up to see the front door open. She was astounded to find Drew shot on the floor. After checking for her pulse, she contacted the cops while attempting to stop the bleeding. Police and paramedics arrived. The detectives wanted to talk to Tracy, but she refused to allow her nephew ride in an ambulance alone. However, Dante and Anna approached Tracy as she was about to depart. Dante called Scout's nanny, who informed him that Scout was attending Alila's kids' sleepover at camp. Anna asked Tracy to describe what had transpired. Tracy discussed the restraining orders and Drew's out-of-control behavior after telling how she discovered him. She also stated that, because to the restraining orders on Danny and Rocco, Scout was unable to visit Monica, one of her few delights these days being to see the children. Tracy claimed to have stopped by to reason with Drew. Dante discovered the safe still open and signs that someone had entered through the rear entrance. He stated there were no signs of a struggle, and the only item out of place was the softball bat left on the living room floor. Tracy left for the PCPD to make an official statement. Dante claimed there was a long list of people who wanted Drew dead, and Anna wondered who was at the top. Brennan was attempting to relax in his WSB office by listening to jazz on his phone. Colette came in and asked if he had heard from Joss and Vaughn, but he hadn't. She urged him again to accept that the Five Poppies' purpose had failed and that he needed to end it. Okay, wait, our second channel link to given in the description, please subscribe. He questioned whether she wanted to see him fail. Colette asked Brennan if she could go to the Five Poppies to clean up the aftermath of an operation. Carly arrived. She was upset and wanted Brennan to be honest. After her battle with Drew, she reflected on how she had been with Drew for almost a year and loved him, but had been entirely mistaken about him. Brennan realized she was worried she was also incorrect about him. Carly stated Brennan had been very nice to her and that he was being as honest as he could. She was uneasy and sorry for being concerned about him, but she couldn't bear the thought of being mistaken about someone again. Brennan stated his want to remain with her and offered her a loving kiss. He could not guarantee never to hurt her, but the notion of causing her anguish breaks him apart. Thankful, she told him, it meant more to him than he knew since he listened to her and was always honest with her. Anna called Brennan to tell him Drew had been shot. Carly was astonished to hear the news and inquired as to who did it and whether there were any witnesses. Brennan said no to both queries, but he was glad she was with him the entire time. Isaiah was asleep at home when Portia came into bed and surprised him. As they were kissing, Portia received a call from the hospital informing her that an incoming VIP needed the services of a chief of staff. She immediately dressed and departed. Anna and Chase were at the hospital, discussing the murder of Judge Heron. Chase suspected Drew killed Heron because she was the judge in Willow's custody case, and he was afraid Willow would abandon him if she could get the kids on her own. Anna was skeptical, but Chase kept coming up with reasons why Drew may be a viable suspect. Elsewhere, Lucas asked Elizabeth if she had seen Willow because he needed the tests he had requested. Elizabeth had to admit that she believed Willow had walked out on her shift. Later, when Willow came soaked, Elizabeth directed her to put on some dry scrubs. When Lucas returned, Elizabeth delivered him the test results he had been waiting for and informed him that Willow had returned. Willow, according to Elizabeth, had departed to clear her brain and was trapped in the rain. Lucas explained that Willow went without authorization and did not notify anyone where she was going. Elizabeth realized Lucas believed she was making excuses for Willow, but she emphasized that she only wanted to help Willow in the same way that others had helped her when she was in difficulties. He told her she was a kind person, but he also reminded her that she was the chief nurse and needed to be cautious. Willow would not bring her down with her. Chase found Willow as she exited the elevator. He told her Drew had been shot, and she fainted in his arms. He took her into one of the family rooms to rest. Meanwhile, Lucas and Elizabeth worked to save Drew. They needed to stabilize him so they could extract the bullets stuck near his spine. Elizabeth notified Portia when she arrived. Portia's stern demeanor made it difficult to know if she was astonished or unconcerned that Drew had been shot. Later, Elizabeth informed Portia that they were able to restore Drew's blood volume following transfusions, stabilize him, and transfer him to the operating room for surgical removal of the bullets. Because Dr. Duggan had not yet arrived, Portia offered to assist with the surgery. Wiley was sitting in the Quartermaine kitchen with Brooke Lynn, drinking hot chocolate, when Michael came with damp hair from rain. Wiley was unable to sleep due to a nasty dream. They sat down to converse at the kitchen table. Wiley inquired as to why Michael was so wet, but he did not respond when reached from his emergency phone. Michael said he got trapped in the rain and left his phone in the car. When he tried to console Wiley by telling him not to worry since he would always be with him and Amelia, Wiley pointed out that his mother had said the same thing and they had never seen her since. He was terrified that the judge would tell Michael he couldn't see them. Brooke Lynn and Michael consoled him by telling him how many people loved him and were always there for him. After putting Wiley to bed, Michael returned to the kitchen. Brooke Lynn asked whether he truly believed it was best for Wiley and Amelia not to see their mother at all. He stated if Willow was the same person she used to be, he would let her see the kids, but she had changed into someone who just cared about herself. Michael told her about Willow's return to Drew. He believed Willow was becoming increasingly insane, and he would do anything to keep her away from Wiley and Amelia. Trina and Kai returned to her and Joss' apartment. Trina was deeply upset by the fact that they left without calling the police. Kai claimed they were guilty of trespassing and burglary and could not explain why they were hiding in Drew's bedroom. While Trina was still upset about the manner they had left Drew, Kai checked his phone for news alerts on him. Kai added that when he saw the car pull up, he purposefully left the door open so that the person could come in and discover Drew. He also showed Trina a copy of the falsified test results he discovered shortly before he bolted out the door. She was grateful, but she realized she couldn't tell her parents they were safe because no one knew they were there. The night began with a desperate plea. Trina had cornered Kai in Drew's office earlier that day, her voice shaking but firm as she told him the truth about Drew's blackmail. Portia had manipulated with Heather Weber's blood test results, keeping the serial killer in prison to protect Trina. Drew, with his politician's ability to find flaws, had discovered this and utilized it to force Portia and her husband, Curtis Ashford, to submit to his wishes. Trina was desperate to obtain the evidence, a tangible copy of the changed test results, before it destroyed her mother's profession and freedom. Kai, still grieving from his own disappointment with Drew, agreed to help. He had a key to Drew's residence, as part of his internship with the congressman, and he knew where the safe was. It was a hazardous idea, but Trina's trust in him, weakened by his previous betrayal, was enough to propel him forward. They had sneaked inside Drew's house under the cover of the storm, the thunder disguising their steps as they walked through the dark halls. The safe was in Drew's bedroom, a sleek, sophisticated device that Kai fiddled with, trying combination after combination. Trina waited by the window, her anxieties fraying with each passing minute. The strategy was straightforward: collect the evidence, destroy it, and escape. But simplicity has a way of unraveling in Port Charles, and when Drew's car's headlights cut through the rain, their plan crumbled into chaos. Drew entered just as they had fled into the closet, his form highlighted by the flickering light of the fireplace. He was alone, or so they thought, as he poured himself a drink and whispered to himself about Willow Tate and a future that appeared just out of reach. The first gunshot had come unexpectedly, a piercing crack that split the air and knocked Drew to the ground. Trina smothered a moan, clamping her hand over her mouth as Kai tugged her deeper into the closet's shadows. The second shot was deliberate and cold, and through the breach in the door, they saw a shadowy figure standing over Drew's body. The shooter's face was concealed, and their movements were quick as they fled into the night. Trina's reaction was to hurry to Drew to see whether he was still alive, but Kai stopped her, his voice a harsh whisper. "Trina, we can't be here. If they find us, we're done." She resisted, her heart screaming for action, but Kai's rationality broke through her fear. Their fingerprints were all over the house, on the safe, the doorknobs, and the bat they grabbed out of desperation. Staying entailed risking everything. They ran via the back door, the rain soaking them to the bone as they stumbled into the darkness. Kai had the sense to leave the front door open, a minor move that proved critical when Tracy Quartermain arrived and discovered Drew bleeding on the floor. Back in Trina and Jocelyn's apartment, the weight of what they had witnessed hung over them like a veil. Trina's hands trembled as she replayed the incident in her head. Drew had a pulse when she checked, but they had abandoned him there, leaving him to his fate. Kai, always practical, insisted they had no option. Trina, we were trespassing. Burglary, even. If we'd called the cops, we'd be in handcuffs right now. He gave her a printout of the changed test results he'd snatched from the safe before they escaped, a small win in the midst of chaos. But Trina couldn't ignore the guilt, the thought that her mother was somehow involved in the shooting. Port Charles was a community founded on secrets, and Drew Kane's shooting reverberated throughout its underbelly. The PCPD, directed by Anna Devane and Dante Falconeri, approached the murder scene with clinical precision. The evidence was damning: 2 gunshots, an open safe, a puddle of water at the rear door, and a softball bat left carelessly in the living room. The suspect list was vast, including Carly Spencer, Alexis Davis, Curtis Ashford, Nina Reeves, Portia, and even Willow Tate, who had a complicated relationship with Drew. Everyone had a purpose, and the town was buzzing with gossip. Some speculated on Willow's betrayal-fueled wrath, while others suggested a random act of violence by an unknown player. However, for Kai and Trina, the truth was a hazardous burden they carried in silence. Kai's commitment to Trina has already been tested. Months before, he had abused her confidence by informing Drew about Curtis and Portia's plan to frame him for drug usage, in a desperate attempt to defuse his blackmail. Kai believed in Drew at the time, seeing him as a mentor who had paid his life-changing surgery. But overhearing Drew's nasty glee about Curtis's plight had destroyed that illusion. With Drew struggling for his life in the hospital, Kai's viewpoint had transformed dramatically. He was completely committed to Trina, determined to defend her and her family even if it meant putting himself at risk. The days after the shooting were a whirl of suspicion and anxiety. Trina couldn't get rid of the vision of Drew's body on the floor, the sound of bullets echoing in her head. She confided in Kai, her voice breaking as she expressed her worst fear, that Portia, motivated by her fierce protectiveness, had pulled the gun. Portia had told Nina at the Brown Dog Bar that Drew's blackmail had ended her marriage, strained her relationship with Trina, and left her with little to lose. The thought that her mother could have taken such dramatic measures was almost unbearable. Kai, ever the pragmatist, attempted to reassure her. "We're not sure who did it, Trina. But we can't tell anybody we were there. Not yet." Drew's status at the hospital was critical. The bullets were stuck perilously close to his spine, and the physicians, including Portia, tried to stabilize him for operation. Trina recognized the irony of her mother being tasked with rescue the man who had tormented their family. Portia's hands remained firm in the operating room, but her heart was filled with mixed emotions. She had told Nina that the end of her marriage had emancipated her, that she was no longer afraid of Curtis uncovering her falsehoods. But the shooting had altered everything, putting a pall of suspicion over her. Anna and Dante were persistent in investigating everybody with a connection to Drew. Portia's name was on their list, and Trina's terror increased with each passing hour. Kai, meanwhile, was dealing with his own guilt. He had been devoted to Drew once, and it almost lost him Trina. He was resolved to put things right, but the proof they seized from Drew's safe was a double-edged sword. It could clear Portia's name, but only if they can do so without revealing their involvement in the break-in. Kai's mind was racing with alternatives, each one riskier than the last. He pondered handing himself in and admitting to the break-in to divert attention away from Trina and Portia. But the prospect of imprisonment, of leaving Trina to face this alone, was terrible. The town's rumor mill worked tirelessly. Carly Spencer, who had threatened Drew's life in front of witnesses, was the primary suspect. Her rage at Drew's manipulation of Willow and his role in her family's problems was no secret. Alexis Davis, too, had a motivation, her rage driven by Drew's use of the judicial system to keep her away from Scout. Curtis, who had approached Drew with a threat of retaliation, was another name spoken in the precinct. Even Nina, whose affair with Drew had devolved into pandemonium, could not avoid scrutiny. Willow's slip at the hospital, revealing she knew about the shooting before it made headlines, triggered red lights for her, who was already reeling from her own guilt and betrayal. Willow Tate was a wild card in the investigation. Her reconnection with Drew, arranged to obtain custody of her children, had left her emotionally vulnerable. Her disappearance during the shooting had not gone unnoticed, and her defensiveness when questioned by Anna only increased the suspicion. Lucas and Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, concerned that Willow's unpredictable conduct would put her in trouble. Willow's feelings for Drew were a complex mix of love, resentment, and regret. She had seen the ring he planned to give her, Lila Quartermain's heirloom, shortly before the shots were fired. The vision tormented her, representing a future that may never come. As the investigation progressed, Kai and Trina found themselves at a crossroads. The proof they had could have saved Portia, but exposing it would have required them to admit they were present at the crime scene. Kai presented a dramatic plan: he would admit to shooting Drew and say it was an accident caused by panic during their break-in. It was a falsehood, but one that would protect Trina and her family from suspicion. Trina was shocked and refused to let Kai sacrifice himself. "You're not going to prison for this," she said, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "We'll find another way." The alternative arrived in the form of a surprise ally. Tracy Quartermain, the master strategist, had her own motivations for wanting the truth about Drew's shooting to be revealed. She had located him, after all, and her acute mind had pieced together enough of the puzzle to conclude that Kai and Trina were involved. Rather than turn them in, she proposed a deal: hand over the evidence, and she would make sure it got to the proper people without implicating them. Tracy's motivations were ambiguous, partially a desire to protect her family's legacy, and partly a dislike for Drew's descent into corruption, but Trina and Kai had little choice but to trust her. The plan was set in motion. Tracy presented the evidence to Anna as an anonymous tip. The falsified test results exonerated Portia of any motive, moving the investigation's emphasis elsewhere. However, the relief was short-lived. The PCPD identified Kai's fingerprints on the softball bat, which they had left behind in their haste, and issued an arrest warrant. The news struck Trina like a physical punch. She implored Kai to stay out of it, to let her find another path, but his desire to protect her had put him squarely in the sights. The arrest was rapid and public, catching the attention of Port Charles. Kai stood erect with his mouth set as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. He refused to speak, even as Dante pressured him for answers. Trina stared from the sidelines, her heart bleeding at the enormity of his sacrifice. He wasn't just defending her, he was attempting to atone for his previous betrayal and demonstrate his unwavering loyalty to her. However, the cost was high, and the truth about the gunman remained elusive. Drew clung to life in the hospital, his surgery having gone well but his recovery being unclear. Portia, fatigued from the ordeal, confronted her own reality. She had saved Drew's life, but the secrets she held from Trina and Curtis had irreparably harmed their family. Curtis, caught between rage and love, confessed in Jordan Ashford, acknowledging his role in exacerbating the argument with Drew. Meanwhile, the town was abuzz with speculations, each one more bizarre than the last. Some referred to Sonny Corinthos, whose history of violence made him an easy target. Others murmured about a strange person, a ghost from Drew's past who had finally caught up to him. Trina, overcome with remorse and anxiety, refused to let Kai take the fall alone. She went to Anna and revealed a partial truth: they had been in Drew's house seeking for something to defend her family, but they had not pulled the trigger. Anna, ever perceptive, realized there was more to the story, but they agreed to keep their involvement hidden for the moment. The investigation switched to the physical evidence, the puddle of water, the open safe, the bat, each hint representing a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit together. As the days passed into weeks, Kai's arrest became a rallying point for people who believed he was innocent. Trina, determined to clear Drew's name, probed further into his adversaries, revealing a web of deception that extended far beyond Port Charles. Drew's political ambitions had made him a target, and the gunman might be anyone, from a rival politician to a disgruntled ally. When the truth finally came out, it was both simpler and more terrible than anyone had anticipated. The gunman was revealed to be a hired gun, hired by an unknown individual to silence Drew before he could reveal a broader plot. The evidence Trina and Kai had stolen unwittingly pointed to this truth, and Tracy's scheming guaranteed it got into the appropriate hands. Kai was released, and his fake confession was exposed as a desperate attempt to protect those he loved. But the victory was bittersweet. Trina and Kai's relationship, already straining from his previous betrayal, faced fresh hurdles. Trust, once destroyed, was difficult to recover, and Trina grappled with the realization that Kai was willing to give up everything for her. Portia, too, suffered consequences. Her career was secure, but her marriage to Curtis was hanging by a thread. Drew, who was slowly healing, was forced to confront the consequences of his actions, his political career in shreds. Port Charles returned to its unsettling routine, with the shooting becoming just another chapter in its long history. The events of that rainy night would stay with Kai and Trina, serving as a reminder of how fast devotion might turn to betrayal and how far one would go to protect those they cared about. The rain had stopped, but the storm within them was far from over. Kai stepped in just when Trina needed him the most, demonstrating once more that his loyalty is deeper than anyone imagined. With the rising strain around the current catastrophe in Port Charles, Trina found herself trapped in an emotional storm, but Kai's calm presence gave her the strength to persevere. Meanwhile, Britt was dragged into Jocelyn's world of uncertainty and anxiety. Britt offered her support and wisdom, reminding Jocelyn that she didn't have to face her challenges alone, providing an unexpected source of solace when things seemed hopeless. At the same time, Drew's condition worsened, keeping everyone on edge as Portia faced the most difficult decision of her career. Her reluctance to operate stemmed from the convoluted emotions and mysteries underlying Drew's position, not her lack of expertise. Every second counted, and Portia's decision may have far-reaching consequences for him and those around him. As tensions build and loyalties are tested, the lives of those involved become intertwined in ways no one could have predicted. With each passing second, the weight of these decisions weighs heavily on Port Charles, where every decision has the potential to permanently alter everything.